You are most welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Real Impartation Moment on Tuesday Night Anatomy with Daniel Okwen. Today's section, we continue our journey regarding the concept of developmental anatomy. My friends, today we do a pretty simple topic which requires understanding of some concept that we already tackled by way of the pharyngeal apparatus, the pharyngeal arches that we already treated. Okay, will really be an important pillar for us to understand what we are going to do today. My friends, today we treat the development of the tongue. Yes, we are talking about development of the tongue. Now, one thing that everyone is aware is that the tongue, yes, is the structure, is an oral structure, therefore it lies in the oral cavity. But my friends, at the end of this class, we will be able to appreciate that this tongue that we find over here, we have that portion which is in the, of course, the oral cavity proper, actually, by way of talking about the anterior to teres portion of the tongue. Yes, so we have the anterior to teres portion of the tongue, okay, finding itself in the oral cavity proper. So that becomes the oral part of the tongue. And then we also have the posterior 1/3 portion of the tongue, which dwells in what we call the oropharynx. And for that reason, that becomes the pharyngeal part of the pharynx. My friends, some authors even include the posteriormost portion of the tongue. So we are going to, appreciate and understand all these things. My friends, to understand this tongue development that I'm talking about, then as I told you, then we need to revisit the concept that we've done already by way of the pharyngeal apparatus. Yes, that's where we are going. And so it's pretty simple. The point is that the tongue, we need what we call the first pharyngeal arch, and then we need the third and fourth pharyngeal arches. Once we are done with once we know about these things, okay, then development of the tongue is over. Yes. Now, at the end of this class, we will be able to also appreciate some congenital anomalies that may be associated with the development of the tongue. Okay, and so without much ado, let's set the ball rolling. So today we are looking at development of the tongue. Development of the tongue. Now, one thing that we have to be aware is that development of the tongue commences in the 4th week of intrauterine life. Yes. In the 4th week of intrauterine life, that is when the development of the tongue is going to begin. So assuming we are taking a posterior view of the pharyngeal arches or the apparatus that we've looked at already, let me just schematically show you something. Now, assuming I have these, okay, let's say this is the first pharyngeal arch. Okay, and then on the other side, yes, I told you they are bilateral structures. Bilaterally, okay, we find these guys over there. They are meeting somewhere in the midline from the craniocaudal, direction. So as we can see over here, this becomes our first pharyngeal apparatus, okay, on either side, second, third, fourth, of course the fifth, disappears, and so we are left with the 6th pharyngeal arch over here. Now, my friends, developing, okay, in the first pharyngeal arch, yes, that's what I want you to know. In the first pharyngeal arch, developing over there is a midline swelling or a midline bud, okay? This guy over here, this midline structure that we find here, this one is known as tuberculum impar. So, in the 4th week of intrauterine life, the first structure to develop, which although contributes very little to the tongue, is the structure that we find over here in the midline, developing from the first pharyngeal arch, is what we call the tuberculum impar. So please put this one down over here, tuberculum impar. Yes, it's a tubercle or is that kind of bat, okay, which of course is the midline bud over there, and impar means unpaired. It's a midline structure, so it's not going to have left and right. It's unpaired. And then around the 5th week of intrauterine life, developing again in this same first pharyngeal arch, okay, you find some swellings also developing. Now, just to let me use the same color, developing over there. Now, these guys are larger compared to that tuberculum impar. Okay, so this one is the one we call, okay, on either side. This is what we call lateral lingual swelling. Lateral lingual to the tongue swelling. So my friends, developing in the first pharyngeal arch, what are those two strides? The first one to develop in the 4th week of intrauterine life is that midline bud. Okay, and that midline lingual bud is what we call tuberculum impar. That unpaired tubercle, which is going to give rise, contribute very little to the tongue, okay, but contributing vastly to the tongue, especially the anterior to chest portion of the tongue, okay, are these two guys on either side of the tuberculum impar. We have what we call lateral lingual swellings. So we have left and right lingual swellings. Now I want you to appreciate this. Now these left and right lingual swellings will eventually fuse, okay, and then they will overgrow to overlap this tuberculum impar. That is why usually I say that regarding the anterior to chest portion of the tongue, contributing largely, okay, significantly to it will be the two lateral lingual swellings, with the tuberculum impar contributing very little to it. Now, the next thing, developing, this time around, I'm interested, not in the second no, I'm interested in the 3rd and then the 4th pharyngeal arches, developing in there, okay, developing in there. Let me use this dark color to show. Is this structure. Now let me divide the structure into two. Now this structure is formed within, now this is the first, this is the second, this is the 3rd, this is the 4th. Okay, of course 6 is here. But I'm interested in, now look at location. Developing in the 3rd and then the 4th pharyngeal arches. That's the level that is developing. This one will contribute to the formation of the posterior 1/3 and of course the posterior-most portions of the tongue. This guy over here, who is below this, from below this, bronchial apparatus, that is why we call it hypobronchial eminence. This guy over here is known as hypobronchial eminence. Hypobronchial eminence. Hypobronchial eminence. Yes. Now, this hypobronchial eminence, in your reading, you may come across something we call copula. Okay, so instead of saying hypobronchial eminence, you can also say copula. Developing in the 3rd and 4th pharyngeal arches. Yes, that's what we see. Now, at this point in time, what is going to happen is that we've seen, then of course development of the tongue is over. It's as simple as that. But one thing that we want to go further and I tell you is that first and foremost, let me show you this. So eventually if I segregate just these ones, okay, what we are going to see is that we will see, let's say we have these lingual swellings, okay, like this, meeting, fusing together, overlapping, where we have this, tuberculum impar over here. And then from there, now one thing is that some authors would like to include the 2nd pharyngeal arch also. But I'm not of that view. Now what's the reason? The reason is that the 2nd pharyngeal arch, okay, this copula over here, which is developing from the 3rd and the 4th, okay, will overgrow to meet what we call the lateral lingual swellings and the tuberculum impar over here. Which means that this posterior 1/3 and the posterior most portions of the tongue is not contributed by what we call the second pharyngeal arch. No. So rather, what I will do here is that we will have this, portion of the tongue. Okay, what is supposed to give us this one. So that's what I put over here. Eventually we will form the tongue. Okay, so the tongue will eventually be over there. Now let's look at something. Yes. So as we've seen, these are the lingual swellings. They're trying to fuse together. They will overgrow over this tuberculum impar. Okay, together these two forming what we call the anterior tracheus portion of the tongue. Anterior tracheus portion of the tongue. Yes. And then this one will also go to fuse with this one, but I'm interested in the cranial portion of this, copula. Okay, so the cranial portion over here is the one which is going to give rise to what we call the posterior 1/3 portion of the tongue, which therefore tells me that caudal portion of this copula or this hypobranchial eminence will give rise to what we call the posterior most portion of the tongue, including the epiglottis. Yes. Now, if you look at this tongue, okay, that's how you see it. So we have what we call the anterior tracheus portion of the tongue, formed by, of course, these lateral lingual swellings and tuberculum impar, and then the posterior 1/3 portion of the tongue, okay, which is over here, is formed by what we call the cranial portion of the copula of the hypobranchial eminence. And then even the posterior most, okay. Now remember that when we say the posterior 1/3 of the tongue, we are talking about the root of the tongue. Now the posterior most portion of the tongue, including this guy over here, where is the epiglottis. Okay, so there are some folds: median glossoepiglottic folds, lateral glossoepiglottic folds, valleculae. Okay, they are those structures in the posterior most portions of the tongue. Yes, they are all going to come from what we call this caudal portion of the hypobranchial eminence. Okay, so that is what we are going to see. Now, eventually, this is how we are going to see the tongue going to be. Now, let me, projecting from here, okay, projecting this concept from here. I'm going to have our tongue. Now let's take it that this is the tip of the tongue. Okay, as we come here, we are going to the roots. So at this point, what we see is that we have what we call the posterior, okay, anterior tracheus portion of the tongue. And then we also have the posterior 1/3 portion of the tongue. And then of course the remaining, okay, by way of the epiglottis will be over there. Now what we will say is that these two, okay, lateral lingual swellings and tuberculum impar will form this. Now, at the junction between what we call the anterior tracheus portion and posterior 1/3 portion is this structure over here. This structure, okay, this structure is something we call foramen cecum. Okay, foramen cecum. Now, the thyroid gland, okay, it's diverticulum. It's duct for going to form the thyroid gland. Okay, begins in the oral cavity only. Okay, it begins over here, and the remnant, that regression over there, the proximal portion of that duct is what we call the foramen cecum. So it represents that area where that thyroid diverticulum migrated, okay, from the oral cavity into the anterior aspect of the neck. Yes. And then over here on either side where there was that fusion, okay, there's a sulcus, and that is what we call terminal sulcus or sulcus terminalis. Sulcus terminalis. Okay. Now, what have I said? The posterior anterior tongue is formed by who? The cranial portion of the copula. Yes. While, of course, the posterior-most portion of the tongue, including the epiglottis, is coming from, of course, the caudal part of the copula or the hypobranchial eminence. Now, here is where I have some issues to tell you. The first thing, sometimes there could be some congenital, anomaly which can happen. So that normally, if you look at my tongue, it's non-bifid. Now, there are some individuals. Now, usually, for instance, snakes may have bifid tongue. But there are some humans also, they may present with bifid tongue or cleft tongue. Okay, there's a slit in there. Why? Because of failure for proper fusion of the lateral lingual swellings. That will lead to what we call the bifid tongue. Yes, that's the first I want you to know. Now, there are other things too that we have to think about. Sometimes too, some people may present with what we call, microglossia. Let me put some of these things down. These anomalies that I want you to know. The first one I've talked about is what we call bifid tongue. Okay, bifid, or something you can call cleft tongue. Now, the other one that I want you to know is what we call microglossia, or you can say hypoglossia. Now, anytime you hear the word glossia, it got to do with the tongue. Yes. So hypoglossia or microglossia means very little tongue. Yes. That's also very important. Now, even apart from this, sometimes it's not like it's little. It can be extremely large. So it becomes macroglossia. Sometimes, often associated with individuals with trisomy 21, Down syndrome, for instance. Okay. Now, sometimes they don't even have a tongue at all. Failure of the tongue. Okay, to develop something we call, aglossia. Aglossia. Yes. Aglossia. That is one thing I want you to know. Now, as we move on, I'll tell you something. The tongue, when it's formed in the oral cavity, the floor of the oral cavity, there are some tissues which are supposed to degenerate, leaving only a midline fold. Okay, so when someone raises the ventral aspect of the tongue, okay, you see there will be a thin fold holding it to the floor of the mouth. That is something we call, the lingual frenulum. Lingual frenulum. Now, when this lingual frenulum becomes so short, yes, then sometimes, on extreme cases, communication becomes very poor. When that happens, okay, we call it tongue tie. Tongue tie. Which clinically, we call it ankylosing. That is also an important term I want you to know. Ankylosing. Yes. Okay, so these are the things I want you to know. Now, let's move on. This tongue that we are talking about, the first thing, what I want you to know is that all these things, I'm talking about the epithelial line and all that. Okay, now let me put something over here. In the tongue, if you look at the ventral portion of the tongue of your neighbor, you see that there are some pinkish or reddish, spots on it. Also, some of them may be whitish over there. Those things, we call them primary papillae of the tongue. Primary papillae of the tongue, okay? Those primary papillae, we have filiform, we have fungiform, we have foliates. But I'm interested in telling you about one of them, which we call circumvallate, or simply call it vallate papillae. Circumvallate papillae. Circumvallate papillae. Now, ventral to the sulcus terminalis, just in front, we see these primary papillae, mucosal elevations on the dorsal aspect of the anterior to test portion of the tongue. Why? Because it's coming in front of what we call this, sulcus terminalis. But this is where there is an interesting concept I want to tell you. It does not mean that this guy we are calling it, circumvallate papillae, circumvallate. Papillae. Now, if it's in front of or ventral to the sulcus terminalis, then you might think it's coming from, of course, the anterior to test portion of the tongue, and for that matter, it's coming from, of course, the lateral lingual swellings and tuberculum in part. No. This time, it's not coming from there, no. It's rather coming from the cranial portion of the copula or the hypobranchial eminence. That is one unique thing I want you to know. Although grossly, we see these circumvallate papillae ventral in front of what we call the sulcus terminalis. Therefore, the idea will be that it belongs to the anterior to test portion of the tongue grossly. But developmentally, and we also understand the nerve supply also, is coming from what we call the cranial portion of the hypobranchial eminence. Yes, that's one thing I want you to know. Now, there is another thing that we have to understand. The first thing, the connective tissue to the tongue connective tissue, okay, is coming. The first thing I want you to know is coming from neural crest cells. Now, you remember, we said neural crest cell, the 4J layer, it gives rise to a lot of structures. So the connective tissue of the tongue will be coming from neural crest cells, the mesenchyme of neural crest cells. Number 2, the muscles of the tongue. So when we talk about the tongue, we talk about intrinsic muscles, extrinsic muscles. Intrinsic muscles, some of them superior longitudinal, inferior longitudinal muscles, some of them running vertically, some of them run transversely. But we can even talk about more. Some may be run obliquely and all that. Okay, these ones, they are the intrinsic muscles of the tongue, having both origin and insertion by way of the attachment in the tongue itself. Then we also have the extrinsic muscles of the tongue. Talk about hyoglossus, talk about genioglossus, talk about styloglossus muscles, and of course talk about palatoglossus muscles. These extrinsic muscles of the tongue, together with the intrinsic muscles of the tongue, will be derived from what we call the occipital myotome. So the myoblasts, which will migrate from the occipital somites, okay, the myotome over there, yes, they will come. They will migrate with it and then come down. You also understand why the nerve supply also. So that is one point I want you to be aware of. Okay, now, so now having talked about this, let's now understand the nerve supply, the differential nerve supply to the tongue. I'm interested in telling you that. The first thing, the anterior to test portion of the tongue, whether it's coming from lateral lingual swell or tuberculum in part, okay, the nerve supply should be coming from where? The general sensation. Okay, touch, detecting temperature, you understand the pressure, and all that. All those general sensations, pain and all that, all those general sensations, okay, to the carried from the anterior to test portion of the tongue. Which nerve is going to carry it? Yes, don't forget that that portion of the anterior to test portion of the tongue came from the first pharyngeal arch. So then the question is, what is the nerve to the first pharyngeal arch? What's the post-traumatic nerve to the first pharyngeal arch? And I'm sure your answer is the mandibular nerve. But my friends, precisely what branch of the mandibular nerve are we talking about? My friends, one of the posterior divisions, okay, one of the branches coming from the posterior division of what we call the mandibular nerve. And my friends, your answer is the lingual nerve. It's your tongue. The tongue is lingual, so it makes it very easy. Okay, so one thing I want you to know is that the general sensation to the anterior to third portion of the tongue, general sensation, is via which nerve? Your answer is, of course, the lingual nerve. Lingual nerve. And whenever we talk about lingual nerve, it's a branch of the third division of the trigeminal nerve. And the third division of the trigeminal nerve, which we've seen already, is the mandibular nerve. Okay, so it makes the concept very easy if you understand, okay, from the pharyngeal arch point of view. Then, if you've seen that, the tongue is also relevant in detecting taste. So what nerve will be responsible in carrying that special sensation by way of taste from the anterior to third portion of the tongue, except the circumvallate papillae? Because the circumvallate papillae, they also be having some kind of taste buds in there. But as I told you, the circumvallate papillae is not fully part, developmental is not part of the anterior to third portion of the tongue. And so whenever we talk about the exceptions, we talk about except the circumvallate papillae. So the question is, what is going to be the answer? So your answer is that when we talked about the nerve to the first pharyngeal arch, I told you that apart from having a post-traumatic nerve, which goes cranially, it also has a pre-traumatic nerve. Yes, you remember that one? That is that nerve we call the cauda tympani branch of the facial nerve. Yes, cauda tympani branch. So we also have special sensation. Special sensation. And what that special sensation tastes? And it's coming through, it will be carried through what nerve? The branch of the facial nerve we call cauda tympani. It's a branch of the facial nerve. Okay, so you see why all these things, okay, the application of the pharyngeal arches that we did. That's the application. Okay, you don't just cram some of these things, memorize, doing rote learning. Try to understand why we are seeing certain phenomena. Okay, now, having seen that, then the next question is, how about the nerve supply? Okay, to what we call going to carry the general sensation from the, posterior anterior portion of the tongue, going to carry the special sensation by way of taste from the posterior anterior portion of the tongue. My friends, it becomes very easy. Let's determine. Now we said that the cranial portion, okay, which means that it's the cranial portion of the hypobranchial eminence, then it will be coming from the third pharyngeal arch. While the caudal portion will be coming from what? The fourth pharyngeal arch. So the cranial portion, which is going to give rise to the posterior anterior portion of the tongue, okay, is coming from the third pharyngeal arch. Then what is the nerve to the third pharyngeal arch? It's just one nerve, a post-traumatic nerve. That is the ninth cranial nerve, the glossopharyngeal nerve. So it's as simple as that. That one, both the general sensation and special sensation by way of taste will be carried through the glossopharyngeal nerve. So the posterior anterior, we talk about glossopharyngeal nerve. And that nerve is the ninth cranial nerve. And as you will be aware, including the circumvallate papillae. I want to always emphasize that, okay, to tell you that developmentally, circumvallate papillae will be coming from the posterior anterior, the cranial portion of the copula. Now, then the question is, we said there's also posterior portion of the tongue, including that of the epiglottis. What should be the nerve supply? Yes. So that nerve supply, yes, should be coming from, of course, because that one is coming from where? The fourth pharyngeal arch. Okay, then it means that what nerve? It's coming from vagus nerve, but what branch of the vagus nerve? Last time I told you, the superior laryngeal branch of the vagus nerve. And even the superior laryngeal branch of the vagus nerve, I told you that the motor supply, a branch we call external laryngeal nerve, will supply cricothyroid muscle. I'm not interested in that. That's why I'm talking about sensation. Sensory. So what is the sensory component? That is the internal laryngeal nerve. So the internal laryngeal nerve, okay, a branch of the superior laryngeal nerve, And the supralaryngeal nerve is a branch of the vagus nerve, is the one which will be carrying that sensation from what we call the posteriormost portion of the tongue, including that of the epiglottis. Yes. Okay, so that is the understanding that we have to get. So then the next one is that I told you about the cervical myotome. They came from the cervical region, the myotome, the muscles over there. And that is why one of those cranial nerves, okay, what you call it, of course, the 12th cranial nerve, the hypoglossal nerve going below the tongue, okay, will be carried along with the myotomes to come there. For that reason, the nerve supply to the muscles, both the intrinsic and extrinsic muscles, will be coming from where? The cranial nerve 12, hypoglossal nerve. But my friends, always there will be a catch. Yes, so it is not all the extrinsic muscles. The intrinsic muscles exclusively, those ones which will help change the shape of the tongue. Okay, the intrinsic muscles. Their nerve supply will be through the hypoglossal nerve, the 12th cranial nerve. However, the extrinsic muscles, which I mentioned, there are 4. The last one I mentioned, which is the palatoglossus muscle, okay, is not supplied by what we call the hypoglossal nerve, the 12th cranial. No, it's rather supplied by what we call the cranial accessory nerve via vagus. Okay. Yes, cranial accessory nerve via vagus. Something we call, the cranial accessory complex. Something we just call the pharyngeal plexus. Okay, the one who is going to supply it. Okay, so that is, that one that you have to, understand. So which nerves have we talked about so far? I think we've talked about the 5th cranial nerve. And who is that 5th cranial nerve? I'm talking about the mandibular nerve. I'm talking precisely the lingual branch of the mandibular nerve. We also talked about the facial nerve. By which branch of the facial nerve? The chorda tympanic branch, where is the pretraumatic nerve to the first pharyngeal arch. And then we also talked about, of course, the 9th cranial nerve, supplying the posterior 1/3 portion of the tongue. We talked about the posteriormost. We mentioned the vagus nerve, but precisely we talked about the supralaryngeal branch of the vagus nerve. Which portion? Talking about the internal branch of it, and then we also talk about the one we're going to give water supply. We're talking about the hypoglossal nerve. Anything glossal, got to be with the tongue. So my friends, I'm very grateful for your time this evening. Have a good night, all of you, and may the good Lord richly bless you. Amen.